All right, well, everybody, we are so fortunate today to have Chef Mark Joslia with us from Wright & Co. So if you could please, let's give him a huge round of applause and welcome him to Google here in Birmingham.
Thank you, that's very kind. I was actually surprised at all the pictures on me on the walls. It's kind of funny, but
Did you know?
What's this going on here? Yes, but no, it's
Did
great.
you know we needed a signed autograph photograph of you
I
too?
signed one as well, so yeah, I'm very honored and humbled to be here in the first place.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark, for being here. And just, I will let you give a better bio, but just really quickly so you guys are aware of Mark's tenure that he brings to the great city of Detroit. He spent, I know you opened 20 restaurants. I don't know,
well,
8 restaurants over 20 years with Wolfgang Puck,
yes,
right?
you are correct. So I grew up in Madison Heights, Michigan, and I graduated from Lanphier High School.
Woohoo!
Yep. And
any Lanphier grads in the room? That's right next to my house.
That's
but
okay.
Anyway.
That's okay.
Okay. Yep.
And I left pretty much right after I was 18, and I started bouncing around the country. I went to cooking school in New York. Then I went to Maui, Hawaii. I went to Las Vegas. That's where I met Wolfgang. I went to Los Angeles, and then I went back to Las Vegas, and then I went to Atlantic City. And when I was in Atlantic City, he said, you know, Mark, we're going to open a restaurant in Detroit. I do my Wolfgang, but you know, Mark, we open a restaurant in Detroit, Michigan. You go back to your hometown.
That's a good one. That's
No, I'll tell you a funny story. I was at a dinner one time and Wolfgang was there, and they go, hey, Mark, you should know Wolfgang. Mark does a great impression of you. I go, that's really a way to get the good side of Wolfgang. You know what I mean? I'm making fun of him on my free time. But so he said, you go back to Detroit, Michigan. You go back to Detroit, and we open a restaurant. And I said, Detroit like Detroit, Michigan. You know, it was 2005. I said, have you been? He said, it's going to be in a casino. We'll be fine. You know, we'll get some good commerce. So I came back with the intention of opening the first restaurant in the MGM Grand when the MGM opened. And I said, the only stipulation I have is I want my next gig. I wouldn't plan on staying here for 10 years. I'd do it for a couple of years. I'd move on to the next opportunity. And it was going to go back to Hawaii to run all the food and beverage in a small hotel on Waikiki Beach. 2009 comes around, the economy goes bad, and all of our deals dried up.
Yeah.
So there was nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So I stayed on for a couple more years, and then the lease agreement was going to end. And the MGM wanted the facility back because we were the only restaurant that wasn't on the casino floor, and someone under the age of 18 or 21 could come to the restaurant. So they wanted to make it a more casual restaurant, which is now TAP, the sports bar. Right. And so the deal was we would take over the other 2 restaurants that were Michael Mina restaurants at the time. So I opened both of those as well. So, but in the hiatus, shall we say, when I was considering whether or not I still wanted to stay in Detroit and how this was going to work out, you know, I lived right downtown Detroit, and I moved back in 2007. So when I moved back, I said there's only 50 people that live downtown. I know because everywhere I go, I see the same 50 people. You know, and living on Woodward, I also would walk out my front door and I said, where do I get to go eat and drink in this town? You know what I mean? You know, there were some places, Detroit Beer Company, Vicente, so on and so forth. But when these towns started to change with a lot of new commerce that came, I would walk out my front door and I'd see lots of young professionals like yourself, and I said, where do they get to go eat and drink?
Right.
And that's when the whole mindset changed. I said, I think we should try and do something downtown in the core of the city, trying to create what we call the gathering place, the kind of place where you could come for a beer before the baseball game, a glass of wine after the opera house, or anything in between, make it approachable, reasonably priced, and hopefully with not much to compare it to at that time, that we thought that would be our core business model.
Yeah.
And we were very fortunate the way it worked out.
And you
so
have,
far.
and I was, if you didn't hear earlier, we were saying a group of us actually went to Wright & Co. last night just to kind of check out the scene, and not 4 out of the 5 of us had never been there before, so we spent some time looking for it. We were expecting, you said it's on Woodward Avenue. We were, you know, on the first floor across from the Aloft Hotel. Yes. Knew it was by John Varvatos, and then the one person in our group who had been said, oh, it's on the 2nd floor. So the first question I had for Mark, and I'd love for you to kind of talk about that with the group too, was why did you choose loft space? That's so interesting, and such a neat concept for what the American Small Plates atmosphere is that you provide. Well, it's an interesting story. Also, make sure you tell the John Varvatos story too.
I will. I will. I promise. So I knew Richard Chayette, who was legal counsel for Dan Gilbert. He used to come in the original Wolfgang Puck restaurant with his wife. They'd always come in late because he would get off work late. And then when I would finish work, he'd say, sit down and have a glass of wine with me and let's talk about Detroit. You know, Bedrock and Quicken Loans and the whole group was trying to figure out what Detroit needed and talk to people that live downtown and say, what do you miss? What do you think we should be doing? So on and so forth. So when I started to look for something, I called Richard and I said, can you find someone who could show me around some of your vacant buildings and see if we can engage in a concept? The original space that I liked, I brought the next meeting, I brought my business partner Dave Kwiatkowski with me, and I said, this is the space. And the gentleman who was there, he goes, oh no, you can't have the space. It's already been leased and you got some bad information. And so they said, let us show you some other spaces, and none of them really worked. And they said, we have one last space we haven't showed anybody yet. And they took us up to Wright & Company on the second floor. Mm-hmm. And it was all beat up wood, and the light was shining through the windows. It looked very European coffee shop-ish. And we fell in love with the space before we knew what we were going to do with it. Yeah. Dave's like, this is perfect. You know, so we're all excited. And then the next day we're like, perfect for what? You know what I mean? Like, what are we going to do with it? You know what I mean? So, yeah. So you know, people, let me retract. Me, Dave, consider ourselves good eaters, drinkers, and travelers. And we wanted to create the kind of place that we would seek out if we went to another city. So if you go to a place like Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia or New York City, there's lots of places on second floors, lots of places in basements, lots of places in alleys, which we have one of those now as well, a cocktail bar called the Bad Luck, which we can get to later. But to try, you know, we did what we thought was cool. We tried to create the kind of place that we wanted to hang out all day. Yeah. You know, and then we kind of hoped that just resonated with everybody else. And we didn't think we needed a ton of people to gather into the concept, just enough. Mm-hmm. You know? So we did it and just hoped that it all worked out. Now, the first 3 days we opened, nobody came. And we thought it was the worst idea we ever came up with our whole life. And then the next day it started to trickle in, and people found it, and then there's some buzz got created, and then everything's been fantastic ever since then. You know? Yeah. So so we were in the infancy of the restaurant, and Bedrock had been talking about the retail that they were trying to create around us, you know, to stimulate some business on the Woodward corridor. And they said John Varvatos is one of the gentlemen that's looking to come to Detroit and open a store. So we were interested, you know, to hear that someone like that was come. So yeah. It was early in the morning, and me and Dave were the only ones in the restaurant, and the elevator opened up, and the elevator dings when the door opens up. And 10 young people come in, 10 young men dressed really sharply, skinny kids, you know, good looking. Yeah. And I'm like, well, who let them in here? You know, because the elevator's locked. And
they're
so
starving. They're skinny kids.
They kind of panned out through the room and then opened up, and then Dan Mullen, who was a representative for Bedrock, Jim Katai, Dan's business partner, and John Varvatos walk in behind them. So we get up, and Dan Mullen says, "This is Mark, and this is Dave, and they own Wright & Company." And John Varvatos is looking around. And he's like, "You two own this place?" We say, "Yes, we do." He goes, "It's a pretty badass space." And I said, "Well, coming from a gentleman like you," I go, "that's one heck of a compliment." You know what I mean? So he said, "I'm thinking about it happening downstairs. How do you feel about that?" And I said, "Only if we get to throw your grand opening party." And so I had heard when he took over the old punk bar in New York City and opened a clothing store, he left the stage in and Kiss played the grand opening party. So I knew it was going to be a big affair. So Alice Cooper played in the store, and we were the VIP room upstairs. They blocked off of Woodward, and about 600 people came, and wow. Yeah, so we only so many people could come upstairs. But yeah, I didn't tell you this story. So the VIPs got to go to the balcony of what the John Varvatos store is and watch the Alice Cooper show, and then go back up. And Dave comes down and he says, "You know, the fire marshal's here and he's really upset with us. There's too many people in Wright & Company." And I said, "Well, where's the security? He's supposed to check the wristbands. Yeah. Why isn't he checking the wristbands?" "I don't know, but the place is a zoo." So I watch the end of the show. I go back upstairs to the security guard, and he goes, "Where's your wristband?"
To you?
Yeah, and I said, "Rumor has it you should have been asking that about an hour ago, because apparently there's too many." So I gave him my card. He lets me in, and literally it was like wall-to-wall people, and so we had to go. get some people out. Because we had tables set up for Dan Gilbert and for Alice Cooper, and Michael Bolton was there, and some other people. So we had to make sure everybody got taken care of. But it's kind of funny, they wouldn't even let me back in my own restaurant after I decided to throw the party. So
does that present logistical challenges then, being on the second floor with coolers or storage?
It does, and we'll talk about the view here in a second. But all of our storage is downstairs. So all our walk-in coolers, all our dry storage, our Fort Knox of booze is all in the basement. So every day the situation is that the prep people prep whatever is on the list, take it downstairs, rotate the stock, bring the stock upstairs, stock the restaurant for service, and then when they leave, the cooks come in and the place should be set up for them. So you had mentioned, why don't we do lunch? That's part of the reason. I don't know what to do with the staff who is spending all day right now setting up so we can have a busy dinner. Like Katy Perry's at the LCA tonight, so we're planning on having a pretty big night, some good commerce downtown. So, you had also mentioned originally about the second floor. If you're on the first floor of a building in a storefront, you see cars and people. And the second floor, if you look out, right company, or if you're in table 40, we call it the VIP table. One was next to you, in the turret.
I wasn't at the VIP table last night?
No, you weren't. You're right. Well, you didn't let me know you were there till after dinner. You gotta let me know ahead of time, so I reserve it for you. But you can look right down Woodward all the way to Campus Martius and see the cityscapes. You see cityscape, you see architecture, you see more than just people walking around, and it's a totally different dynamic, and that's what we really fell in love with as well.
The restaurant was completely illuminated last night too, because of all the holiday lights. You could see the tree from Campus Martius, and then it's just so beautiful what that stretch of Woodward has become. And with the Shinola Hotel going up a couple doors away from you, it's just, you made the right decision.
Well, they said all the commerce around us. The Element Hotel will be right behind us. The Siren Hotel will be right next to them.
Right.
So when we talked about timing and location, it just worked out amazing for us. But at the time, we totally speculated that if we were close to the arenas and we were close to the event spaces, that maybe we could draw some traffic to the area, no matter how quirky the space was. But I said it gets better every day. And now like I said, the LCA really helped us as well, because of the fact that when you talk about 20,000 people coming down on a Wednesday, in wintertime, when they're now, that if 1% of them comes to Wright and Company, 200 people, then it's incrementally going to be a much better Wednesday than we would normally have. So 5 events a week between the Pistons, the Red Wings, and all the concerts, that also helps for us as well.
Yeah.
So, so like I said, every time you read an article, you're like, we seem to be in the general vicinity of what's going on in some capacity.
Well, and it does bring down a more diverse and unique crowd than the sports crowds that you get at Ford Field or at the Copa. So that'll be good for you guys too. And then us, of course, when we move down to Detroit, we'll all.
And we look forward to that as well. So we also have another venue. We have a Chinese restaurant in what was the old Chinatown called the Peterborough. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's on the other side of LCA, so it's about 1 mile kitty corner.
Yeah.
It's right behind the Masonic Temple and what was the old Chinatown. So the building right across the street from us, Chung's, was the last Chinese restaurant that was still open in the old Chinatown in 2000. And the gentleman we partnered with found this facility, wanted to rehab the building, and thought it'd be cool to open a Chinese restaurant. So in the old Chinatown, so we opened a place called the Peterborough about 2 years ago. And so we also have that on the other side of us. It also is perfectly located for the new arena. And Founders Brewery just opened across the street from us now, which will also bring people to the area. And we're bridging the gap between the arena and what is quote unquote Midtown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? On the other side of Martin Luther King, we're still in what was kind of the Cass corridor. But the shipping container facility you may have read about, the Detroit Shipyard, is right next to us. And so that's being built as well. So we're going to be right smack, hopefully, again, in an emerging area of Detroit where all the commerce will come up around us, and we will just hopefully position ourselves properly again. So, and then we do have a cocktail bar called the Bad Luck that's in an alley in the Albert.
Is this the super secret project you were working on for a fall 2017 opening that you couldn't comment in?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about it. That's exciting.
So if you've ever been downtown to the Belt, where like Standby is in the Skip, like that's an alley. Very, very nice, decorated, graffiti alley. We're in a functioning alley, like real alley. Like bums, dumpster alley. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And it wasn't really purposeful. Like we didn't want to create some experience like it's going to be an adventure to get there. But it was a space that became available. They didn't know what to do with that. It was a really good deal.
Yeah,
so we created, and we also wanted to create something a little more grown up, shall we say. You know, I have no, first of all, I know everybody downtown. So I'm not, if I say anybody's name, I say it with affection. You know what I mean? I love Standby. I love what it is. But sometimes it's a little more like a club.
Right.
You know what I mean? We wanted somewhere where you could sit across from your date, have a nice drink, in a sedate atmosphere, a little more grown up, shall we say. So we created this cocktail bar called the Bad Luck, and it's based on the tarot cards. Our 13 seasonal drinks are all based on the tarot cards.
Well,
It's a call ahead program. You call up and they tell you how long before your table will be ready. That way you don't walk down this alley in your high heels or you're in the snow or whatever it turns out to be. And then when you get in, it's a secret little oasis in this alley to where we have a really sexy cocktail bar. There is no food.
Nice.
If you're hungry, Brighton Company's a block that way. So we'll help you out that way. We'll get you a reservation.
Would you call it a speakeasy?
We don't per se. I mean,
No?
I think that term gets a little overused. We just have a really sexy cocktail bar, and we're proud that we were recognized by Eater by the design awards this year. We were the best designed place, and so that we just got that the other day, which is cool. So people are recognizing for what it is, and
We had a long day at our client's office yesterday before we came into the restaurant, and it was funny. We told one of our clients in the meeting where we were eating dinner at, and she goes, "Oh my God, the food is amazing, but honestly, the best part is Jake, the bartender. He's so hot." So you can have Jake at the Bad Luck bar, maybe? Maybe you should consider that.
Exactly. So. Hey, listen, every little bit helps. I told you last time,
Whatever it takes,
we only have a couple of rules at Wright & Company. The first one is we hope you have a good time, enjoy your meal, and you tell your friends, right? And the other one is we hope your credit card goes through. Besides that, you know what I mean? Everything else is up for discussion. So if you come to see Jake, I'm cool. You know what I mean?
Okay,
I'm cool.
all right, yeah.
That's the draw
Yeah.
this week.
I'm sad I
fine.
didn't get to meet him last night, but we'll come back. So at the Bad Luck, then, do you read tarot cards, or is it just you designed based off the 13 tarot cards?
Yanni Fry is our managing partner. He used to work to be the head bartender at the Sugar House. And so he's there. He devises all the drinks, and so the 13 tarot card drinks. And then, just like anything else, you can have whatever you want. If you want a gin and tonic, if you want something else to drink, he's happy to make it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to promote what we would do. And we got a little bit of flack, shall we say, when we first opened. We did have a $90 cocktail. It was based on a flagon of very rum from the British Navy from 1957, and so. So we would pour it for you 1 ounce neat, so you could try it on its own, and 1 ounce in the daiquiri. So you technically got 2 drinks. And so there was a lot of talk about the $90, but realistically, if you go to any bar worth its weight, they may have some Pappy Van Winkle, which may cost you $120. They may have Louis XV, the cognac, that may cost you $150. So we didn't really understand why we were trying to outplay everybody with our $90 cocktail. Wasn't really the premise. We just said we have something very unique. You're not going to get this. So we got all 3 flagons of this. So we monopolized the rum aspect of it. So if you want to have it, you got to come see us.
You still have it. You didn't get rid of it just because you had flack, right?
No,
okay, good.
No, it's still there. But I'm just saying, so there was a little flack about what we were trying to create, and that was not the intention. But as I say, no publicity is bad publicity sometimes.
That's true.
I mean? So,
that's true. Well, so I want to talk a little bit more about you.
Okay.
And one of the things I read about you that I thought was really interesting was, someone as talented as you are in the culinary space usually, comes out of the womb screaming, "This is what I want to do." But you didn't really get that bug until much later in life, even though you graduated from the Culinary Institute of Arts of America. So
you were correct.
Tell us about that.
So I was not the best student in high school, and so when my parents were starting to press me, like, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" The only real thing I was really good at was math. So I didn't really foresee myself being an accountant or anything like that. So I had a couple of buddies. There was a vocational school that you could go to instead of taking your elective credits in high school.
Okay.
So during the day, you would take the things you had to, like government or English, and then in the afternoon, you go to vocational school and you could learn a trade. So one of them was taking auto mechanics, where he worked on his car all day, and the other one was taking heating and cooling. And there was cosmetology and other things like that, and there was food service.
Yeah.
So me being trying to get out of school as opposed to engage more in school, I said, "This is a great idea. I think I'll take food service." I thought, if nothing else, maybe I'll make some food and I could eat, and that's why I'm fat. and then maybe I'll meet some girls. You know what I mean? So that was my
Yeah,
my whole
cooking
premise.
class, yeah.
And so after doing it for a while, it turned out I was really good at it. Recipes were easy to decipher, measurements and the tech. I like to work with my hands, so that all kind of came together. So my teacher would start having me help with someone who was struggling, like because I would be a little faster. She said, well, you go help Laura out with the cake or whatever. So I said, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what we should do. And a gentleman came from the Culinary Institute of America and said, and told us about the school for about 45 minutes, and then handed out applications, told us how it works. And so I went home to my mom and dad, and I said, and this was in the late 80s, mind you. It wasn't exactly that fashionable to be a chef, you know what I mean, or that cool. You know, there was no Food Network and things like that. So so I went home and I said, I want to go to this cooking school in New York. And my dad said, this is a joke, right? Like you want to go cook for a living, or and my dad was a prominent engineer working for General Motors and things like that. So I said, I don't know what else you want from me because I don't know how to do anything else, and I feel good like this, and I could. So I'm going to try. You know what I mean, so they said okay. They didn't believe me. So I had to pay for my first half. So I got some jobs when I was at school, and once I started to excel, then they paid for the rest of my schooling and said, is going to work out. So sometimes you just kind of fall into some things, Yeah. And then I started bouncing around the country. And when I went to Maui, Hawaii, I didn't take it that seriously either. I was on the beach.
I feel like you're not supposed to, though. When you're in Waikiki, you're not supposed to.
Yeah, so I was fooling around in Maui. I worked for a restaurant. I learned some things, and then I felt like I had to get more focused on it if I was going to. So I got a job with the Hilton Corporation, and then they transferred me to Las Vegas where my parents were, which I thought was going to be a good opportunity. And then I met Wolfgang Puck.
Yeah.
When he opened in 1993, when he opened the restaurant in Las Vegas, and so then the rest, shall we say, is history. Because the timing was good, and I met the right man at the right time, who helped you become a better chef. I used to make Wolfgang dishes, and he'd be like, "You're going about this all wrong. You're trying to create something that doesn't have proper flavor profiles or any of that." And I talk to young chefs now about this all the time. He said, start with something you like. Start with something that works. So he says, take ham and cheese, for instance, right? Everybody likes a ham and cheese sandwich, right?
Everybody.
Yeah, and if you don't, maybe you like mustard on it, right? So the flavor profiles work, ham, cheese, mustard. So you can, in turn, create anything with those flavor profiles that could be cool or different. And I look back at a dish we're doing right now on our menu, which is a gnocchi. It's a Parisian gnocchi, so it's crispy, But it's Parmesan and a Parmesan broth with prosciutto, you know what I mean? Which is there, and then your bread is a gnocchi. So it's like, in a way, you use the bread as a gnocchi, the Parmesan and the Parmesan broth is the cheese, and the prosciutto is the ham. You know what I mean? So I didn't even do that on purpose. Sometimes it comes subconsciously. But you can look back at different aspects and see how that worked together.
Right.
And the things that he taught you and how to do that are things that still apply to what I do today and the style that I try and create through our food.
It's so basic, and yet, I have to read this. The pork belly sliders that you brought.
Yeah.
Tomato jam, arugula, sriracha aioli on a toasted brioche bun, and it's the best thing I've ever had. It's so amazing.
Just like with I talk about cocktails as well, they just start a middle and an end to every food, right? So when you eat something, and if you don't have the start or you don't have the end, then there's something missing, whether it's acid or something to bring it up, or salt to elevate a flavor. There's something that's missing, and that bite is perfect because you have the butteriness of the brioche bun, the bitterness of the arugula, the sweetness of the tomato jam, the spiciness of sriracha, and the smokiness of the pork belly. So you covered a gamut of flavors. So when you eat it, a lot happens. But also back to Wolfgang, the sriracha aioli is 3 ingredients. The tomato jam is 5 ingredients. It's tomatoes, it's apples, it's lemon juice, it's sugar. That's pretty much 4 ingredients. So one's going to take several simple ideas to create one complex idea is the game, shall we say. Find the best products you can find, handle them properly, and then create the flavor profile so that it works. So I could teach you how to make that dish, but you have to. No, seriously, because they said I have standardized. But I said, but you have to understand the flavor profiles to get to that point.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea. There's lots of things we made that we thought were a good idea that was like, that's a terrible idea, and we never made the menu.
And speaking about ingredients and keeping it local and Detroit coming up, do you have do you source a lot of the ingredients that you make in the restaurant from local places?
As much as possible. Now, the urban farming scene isn't growing as fast as we'd like.
Oh, it's
so sometimes, you want 10 pounds of green beans and they have 5 pounds of green beans.
Sure.
Because you want green beans, I want green beans, he wants green beans. We all want the same products. People like Recovery Park and people like that are doing a really great job, but you can't grow fast enough for busy restaurants. I mean, some of the
Right.
places like Chartreuse and Southern Standard and us, we're busy. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
yeah.
we're using a lot of carrots. We're not using a bunch of carrots. You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
using boxes of carrots.
Yeah.
So we do as much as we can. Then you just have to supplement accordingly. So, and then the new facet really is now that different people are trying to grow stuff for you. You know what I mean? So right now, people will engage and say, tell us what you think you're going to need in the summertime, even if it's a pedestrian product like a cucumber. If you know you're going to need it, we'll have a plot of land. We'll grow cucumbers twice, and we'll harvest one while the other ones are growing, and then harvest back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and maybe keep you in cucumbers all summer. So people are looking at more interesting techniques to try and get the products to us as well.
So are these local sellers who approach you sort of cold call-ish
A
in the
lot of
restaurant?
them,
or-
do. There's people in like
Okay.
7 Mile and Woodward and Bernard Parks who does some things at the old school over off Monroe, and obviously Recovery Park and
Yeah.
people like that. A lot of local people that come and say, they send you lists really what's going to be available. Here's what we have now. Here's what we're going to have in a couple weeks from now, and here's what we're going to have moving forward. So you try and get in before everybody else.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
I don't know if it works this way, but you try and be the first one to email. Like, I'll take the green beans. You know what I mean? And hope I said yes before Andy said yes or something like that. So, but they're all really good friends of mine. So we like to. Everybody wants to have something that they can showcase as well.
So you're saying that there's an opportunity for urban farming too in downtown Detroit too?
No,
So
absolutely.
if anyone's a farmer,
The only thing I will say is
20% projects.
I can't say how lucrative it is 'cause I don't know what the
Yeah,
work
it's
versus
interesting.
profit margin to come out of it is. I mean, a lot of them are
Yeah.
passion projects and things like that. But
Right.
yeah, there's lots of room for lots of things in Detroit, contrary to popular opinion.
we know we just heard about one new project. Do you have your eye on anything else? Or?
We always do.
Future?
We're engaged a lot, and but the town has changed as well. I mean, real estate is more expensive. Contracting is more expensive. I mean, we were talking, if I was trying to build Right Company today, 3.5 years later, it'd probably cost me 30 to 40% more than it did.
Yeah,
Because
wow.
they said, well, the demand for contractors, and just like we talk about people in the industry having trouble filling some of these jobs, same thing with contractors. The LCA took up a lot of people, so
Yeah.
a lot of projects get put on hold because they used as many resources they could to get that open.
Yeah.
And now a lot of the residential that's happening in Brush Park is taking up a lot of contractors. So the guys that you're going to build your floor, the woodworkers, are all building cabinets for different projects now, and then so the price escalates, material escalates. And the way we desire to engage as far as tenant improvement plans, money that we expect the people that own the buildings to invest as well, doesn't always jive with everybody either. So
Yeah.
we talk more than we engage, but we have another opportunity possibly on the table that we think might work out in the springtime.
Hopefully in the LCA.
If it was that easy,
We'll have to have you to the new office when it opens up, and maybe let you come and do a guest chef day or something.
I'd be
for
delighted
us.
to. I'd be
Okay,
delighted
that'd be
to.
great.
So,
Yeah.
so.
Excellent. Well, I know that we're about 10 minutes out here, and I don't know if anyone has any questions for Mark, but I wanted to make sure I left some time. I think you might have to use the microphone because we're filming, so.
Hi, Chef. I've been to Wright & Co. a couple times, and I love it,
Well,
by the way. But I had a question about the restaurant. Actually, behind the bar, there's a beautiful painting.
Oh, yeah. It's
And I
stunning.
want to, it's a ship on stormy seas, and I wanted to know, is there a story? I always wondered if there was a story behind that.
There is. So my business partner, Dave, well, first of all, the ceilings are very high at Wright & Company, so it's a very grandiose space, and we didn't want to put mirrors or something like that. We were trying to figure out what some focal point we could do. So we bantered about lots of different things, and Dave had a smaller replication of that painting. It's by a very famous maritime artist, Dutch. The flags in the painting are Dutch. Ludolf Backhuizen, and it was a replication of a painting from 1690 called Ships Run Aground in a Storm. So Dave said it'd be cool, if we could have this focal point. So we found a local artist, Michelle Tangway, and we gave her the picture, and we said, we'd like you to replicate this for us. And so she sent us pictures every couple of weeks as she was standing on a ladder, trying to paint this thing, and then it was one of the first things we hung up because we didn't want to have it damaged. So before we put the banquettes in, she tacked it onto plywood on the floor, and then we hung it on the wall. And our woodworking guys actually built the frame around the outside of it, and then we covered it in a tarp while we did the rest of the work. And actually, people talk about the chandelier and the turret as well. That was the first thing
Yeah.
we bought about 1 week at an auction at Du Michel's 1 week after, and it hung there for about 7 months. They were very kind to leave it there with a sold sign because we didn't have anything to do with it. We didn't know, we had
Where
to
to put
have
it,
the
yeah.
ceiling done before we could do the electrical and all that, so there was no way
The
to.
ceiling is that beautiful, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's the tin,
Yeah.
what do you call that? The hammered tin? What is it? You know what?
No,
I don't know, it's so
the
gorgeous,
ceiling's a whole
yeah.
different other story. Like, yeah, there are some really cool aspects about the building. If you're looking at the bar and you're looking at the bar to the left, there's a big piece of plaster. It's not some hipster artwork. That was where the original elevator was. The building was built in 1891 by a gentleman called Frederick Schwankowski, and he had the Schwankowski House of Music was on the first floor, and he inhabited it until 1920 until Wright K Jewelers inhabited the space. And then, so downstairs was an actual storefront where you could buy jewelry, and the second floor was a private viewing room where you could go look at all the fancy diamonds. And at some point, they turned it into a ballroom and hosted parties there. And that's where the name Wright and Company came from as well. So we were trying to pay homage to the history of the building itself. So I said, "What's the name of the building?" They said, "Wright K." So why don't we call it Wright and Company? We're just a
Yeah,
company
that's
that's
cool.
inhabiting this historic piece of history in Detroit. So, and then it became the House of Fabrics and some other things before it became dormant. It was a couple of nightclubs, and then it turned out to be what it was. But the ceiling, so the first thing we did after we cleaned up the space is we were going to blow out the ceiling because we wanted to have exposed rafters. So we had to stain them so it didn't drip on everything else. So we got some scaffolding and we took leaf blowers and we're blowing all the dust out of this building that had been vacant for a long time. And the guys upstairs came downstairs and they said, "Hey, we need you to stop." And so we thought we were making too much noise. And we said, "Are we bothering you in some capacity?" They said, "Come on upstairs." So we were blowing the dust through the cracks of the floor in the little anthills, and there was dust all through the space. So we apologized. We sent a cleaning crew in that weekend and had it for 2 days. They cleaned the whole office building. And then Monday morning comes around and our representatives from Bedrock said, "We need to talk about the ceiling." They said, "We have some sound issues. Obviously this situation." They said, "What if we do this? What if we insulate it, fur it with plywood? We will pay for and install any ceiling of your choice," which sounded very generous at the time. But when we leave, if we ever leave, we're not taking the ceiling with us anyway, so it'll always be there. So it was amenity to their situation. So we decided to have something that would be shiny. So when you came down the street, you could see the chandelier, and it speckles off the ceiling, and then hopefully you go, "What's going on up there?" You know what I mean? And try and figure out how to get in. Our own little game, shall we say, or several games we're trying to play, and one thing, some of it more purposeful than others. We didn't
Sure.
we desired you to enter through the alley and have a real sign, but to hang a sign on a historic building is very expensive. You have to go through a bunch of design work, and so at some point we just gave up. It just became too much of a chore. So we have our little sandwich board. We wanted you to enter through the alley, which
Yeah.
would be easier to hang a sign because nobody cares what you do in an alley. But when they were working on the Metropolitan, some bricks fell off on top of a truck, and we've had scaffolding outside ever since. It's been 3.5 years, so we never really got it. You can enter through the alley and go up through the stairs, but we never had the entrance where we truly desired it because of the construction around us. So we'll see what happens in the future. But right now, I think for the most part, people figure out how to get there, and then I still see people walking around. I tell you with their phones. You can see out the window. They go, "I know it's around here somewhere." They did that last night for a few
That
minutes.
was us. We were
Yeah,
using the Google Maps to
Yeah,
try to
so,
find
there you
you.
go.
But there's some cachet, if you will, about finding the entrance by the sandwich board. That's literally the only
Yeah.
way, at least that I could see last night, to find Wright and Company, and then getting up the elevator, and then it kind of opens, and you're like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, well,
this huge,
you-
beautiful space.
The intrigue in the elevator, and then you come
Yeah.
around the corner, and then you walk down the little hallway, and the space opens up, and then
Special.
hopefully everybody feels that way. You know what I mean? So
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a very special thing going
Yeah,
on
so-
down there.
when we talked about the elevator, I skipped over. It was one of the first buildings in Detroit to have an elevator, so it was called the Elevator Building originally.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, and one other side note, which is a cool story. The lady, the last opera, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank on what the last opera was at the Opera House. The lead in the opera was the great-great-granddaughter of Frederick Schwankowski.
Oh, wow.
And so,
Owner of the
she
building.
had never been to Detroit. She had heard about the building and the business, and they contacted us from the Opera House, and we had a little party, and anybody could have came, and she actually sang 3 songs in the
that's
space.
cool.
Yeah, for
In the restaurant?
In the restaurant.
Where would you have a
We
singer?
she was just in the turret, you know what I mean? And
Okay.
she was told the story about her great-great-grandfather and him building the building and the history of her family, and then her history and how she got back to Detroit for the opera, and then she sang a few songs, and that was pretty much it. So it was cool that
Did she sing in operatic? or-
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, so
Billowing
and all of her
throughout.
family was invited, so we saved some places for them so they can watch her sing, things like that. So it's kind of cool to bring some of the history back.
Yeah.
And also, everybody who's ever known the Wright K building has some story about it, or it was vacant for a long time, so people used to live in there. My father bought his class ring downstairs.
At
God
K
rest his
Jewelers.
soul, yes.
Yeah.
God rest his soul. But yeah, when he was in high school, he bought his when I showed him I told him I was going to quit my job and open my own restaurant once again. The second time he thought I was even crazier than becoming a chef in the first place. But I showed him the building. He goes, "Oh my God, I bought my class ring there when I was in high school." So it was cool.
That is the cool thing about
Yeah.
Detroit. Everyone has some kind of connection, even if you live up in the burbs or you haven't been here very long. It
No,
seems
absolutely,
like that. So.
absolutely.
Thanks for coming in, Mark. We appreciate it. That's a good segue into my question. I was just wondering, you've been in Detroit for a long time with some departures outside, but born and raised here and went to school here, and have been very instrumental in kind of the reinvigoration of downtown. What do you see 10 years from now? What do you see Detroit as being, and what gets you excited for what that might look like?
Well, as much as I'm a proponent of Detroit, I also am a realist and I see the flaws. So I hope Dan Gilbert sees this. Listen, Dan, I'm telling you what you need to do. When we first engaged with
We'll
them,
send it to
they were very purposeful about the downtown and the Woodward corridor and trying to create unique shopping experiences. When we first met them, they said when we redeveloped the Hudson site, we'd like to have a department store. And I said, which department store do you desire to have? And they said, we'd like to have Bloomingdale's would be our first choice. And so this is 5 years ago. I go, don't you think Bloomingdale's a little highfalutin for the area? And they said, what we're trying to do is trying to say that the reason we'd like Bloomingdale's is because there are none in the state of Michigan. And if you want to shop at Bloomingdale's, you have to come
Chicago.
downtown to do it. And so that was their mindset as far as creating retail of things you can't get anywhere else, the reasons to come downtown, to rebuild the tax base, commerce, so on and so forth. And then hopefully it all trickles down, and maybe you want to live there, and then restaurants like ours, maybe you want to live by there, live downtown because there's a cool place to eat and drink and all this. But what we do need to do next is the Q line is fine, but we need to create better public transportation, and we need to create purposeful retail. And I joked around the other day, like, where do I go buy a pair of socks downtown? I live right on the Woodward corridor. Or where do I go buy the necessities of home for downtown? And if you're expecting with the escalation of residential, which is also escalating in price, for anybody that lives downtown, it's not cheap to live downtown. And if you're expecting people to have a car because all of your retail is 10 miles that way, or that way, pay the car insurance, and not be able to get around in public transportation, then you got to start building things so where they don't need a car, they don't need to pay that, and they don't need the public transportation, because I can take the Q line to a Target, or I can get to a Meijer, or whatever you desire, or a Nordstrom Rack, so I can go buy a shirt to go out on a Friday evening. Those are the things that have to start filling in the gaps, or the residential will never truly fill up because people say, I can live somewhere else cheaper where I can have all the amenities I need. Got it, like Ferndale, and then we don't rebuild the tax base is really what this is all about. Getting people to live, work, engage in downtown in the wake of 3 years of bankruptcy, only 3 years out of bankruptcy. And that's the other
Yeah.
crazy thing too. I was talking about this in the elevator to somebody. Wright & Company's only been open 3.5 years, and although we were in the forefront, we don't take really any credit from that. If Andy Halliday hadn't bought the building, Selden Standard would have been open before we would, because he quit his job a year before I quit mine. And we're really good friends too, so that's why I know. But they opened a few months after us. But all of this has really only happened in the last 3 years.
Right.
You talk about all the cool restaurants or bars or shopping or reasons to go downtown. it's really all happened the last 3 years, and we get clouded by that. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it's been a long time. You know what I mean? Like you said, I've been there a long time. I probably have. I'm a veteran. I've been there a whopping 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, it's been such a short time to actually to get all this going. So it's going to take more time, but that's what I really hope for. I hope for not only for myself, selfishly, but so that people that live downtown say, I want to stay because I can get everything I need out my front door at some particular point. So.
That's a great point. We'll make sure we get this to Dan.
I'm
he
telling
can do
you.
something about it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Tell them being able to get everything you need is cool too.
Well,
Right.
I couldn't believe I am down there every day, and I didn't know there was a Lululemon now underneath where you live,
Yeah.
and a Nike store, and
Yeah.
obviously John Varvatos. But that whole stretch, if you guys haven't been down there like in the last month, it's just even
Yeah.
boomed even more.
Yeah, there's Under
So,
Armour, Warby
amazing. Under
Parker,
Armour too,
Bonobos.
yeah.
And there's some more
Yeah.
coming. You know what I mean? So I let
So
Bedrock do
exciting.
their own press, so I don't tell.
Yeah.
Let's talk about who
Enough
they're going to
about
put in the
those guys.
spaces. I'm just saying, this because they tell me. I shouldn't be telling everybody else to let them do the announcement when the new place is going to come. But they are going to
Yeah.
fill up the Woodward corridor. They have other people that are engaging. Some cool things they're going to do in the Hudson site in the next few years after they. That's going to be really interesting to watch them build a 61-story residential / office building right smack in the middle of Detroit.
That will
It's not
be.
going to make parking or getting down there any easier, but it'll be really interesting to watch. So.
Well, all that other stuff is great, but Wright and Company is phenomenal, and really we know that you are early into the scene, into the restaurant scene, really even now. But we appreciate you having it's a luxurious experience from a culinary standpoint, but it is such a super casual and approachable and friendly and warm place to be. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to have a restaurant like that in our city.
I'll say one more thing
Appreciate
before you. That was the main goal, as I told you last night. The original menu only was everything was under $20. We didn't want to feel like you could only come on your birthday, your anniversary, Valentine's Day. Feel like you can come on a regular basis. And the only one dish is Eclipse, just because we wanted a better steak, and it's 22. So
Yeah.
we want you to be able to feel like you can come over there, have a glass of wine, a bite to eat before a game, after the Opera House, anything in between, and not break the bank. And that's, I think that's a very Detroit way of looking at it too.
It
So let's have let everybody come and enjoy Wright and Company, regardless how you're dressed, where you're going, and they'll be able to enjoy it.
Well, we hope that's the Detroit in 10 years from now,
Yes,
too.
yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So.
Excellent. Well, thanks. Let's give Mark a big round of applause, and thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you.